The spiritual principle that we're looking at this day is spiritual awakening. So I want to share with you about the spiritual awakening of humanity that we are in the midst of right now. We are in the midst of the greatest shift in consciousness that we've gone through in a long, long time. We are well into this new millennium in which unprecedented change is occurring. The rules of the old reality no longer apply. Body, mind, and spirit must be used in all that we do and as a necessary trio from which to create a new consciousness. We have entered an evolutionary shift where everything needs to be in harmony with the universal principles of love, peace, joy, trust. The old reality is based on fear, greed, scarcity, control, and force. The old reality. Anybody excited about that old reality, want to keep hanging on to it? Of living in that fear and that greed and that scarcity. But yet we look at that leadership, if we look at the Fortune 500 in countries and governments, the old reality of fear and greed and scarcity and control. For the new reality that we're emerging into is founded upon love, which is the source of our one true power, trust and faith and cooperation and collaboration and abundance. It's time to remember who we are as creators, as the creators that we are meant to be. And the divinity from which we come. The divinity from which we come. A screen that I've used many times. And so clear. It's such a simple message, but a powerful message that we call our authentic, true, real self. Last week we spent in the Free the Heart workshop looking at it as our inner child qualities. It's this wonderful image of the authentic self, my true and authentic self. This is what our divinity is. This is what we're looking at carrying into our daily life from moment to moment, from relationship to relationship, from conversation to conversation, from workplace to our home place, to our next door neighbors, to our stores. Carrying these valuable and important principles upon which are intended to be the foundation upon which we think, act, and behave from. If everyone in the world, from the beginning of humanity, had been demonstrating, acting, expressing these qualities, would we have ever killed a person on earth in war? So I ask you again, have we been asleep? A time or two in our life. And where does the change start? Out there or within our own consciousness? As we reflect upon our own consciousness, it seems that there must be an experiencer. Do you know that experiencer? It's the individual self that is having these experiences, making all the decisions and thinking all these thoughts. But what is the self? What is it really like? What does it consist of? Have you ever made a decision and you're going, who made that decision? Have you ever done that? Have you ever said, where did that come from? No? Am I the only one? I have those times all the time in my life. And sometimes I say them out loud and I go, oh my gosh, where did that one come from? You ever had one of those? It's really fun. Let me tell you, it's not so bad when there's only one person that hears you. But when the whole room hears you, oh gosh, why did that one? Sometimes I've said things and I go, they didn't hear that, did they? Please let that one have just skipped right by. And oh man, they'll get every one of those. But it's that experiencer that sometimes I've often wished for each of us that we could have this experience in our life, that we could just step back outside of our mind and watch it at work. Can you imagine watching your mind? How many of you would get tired just watching your mind at work? And you're not doing anything, you're just watching it. You're observing it. Wow. And you notice some of its thoughts, and you're removed from what it's thinking. You're able to observe it with a clear, healthy space and consciousness. And you're going, my gosh, how can you think that about yourself? How can you think that about your body? How can you think that about the people you work with? How can you think that about your family? How can you think those things? How can you say those things? How can you let people treat you that way? What is it that's important to you? What have you found that makes you want to be passionate, that causes you to be passionate? What if we could watch? What lessons could we learn if we could step back and be the experiencer, watching ourselves having an experience? Wouldn't it be fun? How many of you would like your best friend to do that? Your partner? Gosh, how many of us go, oh no, sorry, show's off right now. Can't watch that one. So, the questions such as these have intrigued and puzzled philosophers for centuries. Some, like the well-known Scottish philosopher David Hume, spent much time searching within their experience for something that seemed to be true, that seemed to be their true self. But all they could find in this inner search for our true self was various thoughts, sensations, images, and feelings. However hard we look, we never seem to find the self itself. Have you ever thought of it that way? You're looking for this magic. Sometimes I think we're looking for this magical thing that's somehow, every time we get close to it, it moves inside of us. Have you ever felt like that? You know, hey, I'm getting pretty close, and then it's gone again. And then we're over there looking for it a little while, and then it's gone again. And we're constantly looking for that thing on the end. What is that thing that we're looking for? The thing. Not finding an easily identifiable self at our core being. We look to other aspects of our lives for a sense of identity. We identify with our bodies, with how they look, how they are dressed, and how they are perceived by other people. Anyone ever done that? We identify with what we do and what we have achieved, with our work, our social status, our academic qualifications, where we live and who we know. We derive a sense of who we are from what we think, our theories and beliefs, our personality and character. There is, however, a severe drawback to such a sense of self. Being derived from what is happening in the world of experience, it is forever at the mercy of events outside of ourselves. A person who draws a strong sense of identity from their work may, on hearing that their job is threatened, feel their sense of self being threatened. Someone else who identifies with being fashionably dressed may buy a new set of clothes every time the fashion season changes. Not because they need new clothes, but because their sense of self needs to be maintained. Or if we identify with our views and beliefs, we may take a criticism of our ideas to be a criticism of ourself. Any threat to our sense of self triggers fear. Fear is of great, listen to this, fear is of great value if our physical well-being is being threatened. Then we need to have our heart beat hard, our blood pressure rise, and our muscles tense. Our survival in life may depend on it. But this response is totally inappropriate when all that is being threatened is our psychological self. Whoa. Having our bodies repeatedly put on full alert is a principal cause of stress. Do you understand that? We can easily end up in a permanent state of tension. You know, have you ever touched somebody's shoulders? Maybe this is yours. They are rock hard. And they haven't done a day's of work of physical labor in the last 6 years. They're just tense. They're just tense. You touch them, they jump. Opening us up to all manner of physical illness. You got to understand tension, stress. Our emotional life may suffer, leading to anxiety or depression. Our thinking and decision making can likewise deteriorate. Fear also leads to worry. I know no one in here worries. We worry about what others might be thinking of us. We worry about what we have done or not done, about what might or might not happen to us. When we worry like this, our attention is caught up in the past or the future. It is not experiencing the present moment. Worry is kind of like a bad smell that just won't go away. Have you had that? You keep washing it off, and that stinking worry is still there. Perhaps the saddest irony of all that is that worry prevents us from finding that which we are really seeking. The goal of every person in the final analysis, is for a comfortable state of mind. That's what we're battling. It's just to create that comfortable state of mind that the first time someone disagrees or the first time somebody expresses a viewpoint that's a little different than ours, we just don't go all to pieces. Do you know how easy some of us get so shook up? And it's like, okay, if we're coming from our true, real, authentic self, do we really get shook up because somebody disagrees with our viewpoint? Oh my God, I got to get tense over that. I got to defend it. I got to strike out because it's different from mine. My psychological state of being is being threatened. So now if it's being threatened, I got to get other people to feel my threatened feelings. And I got to get them to agree with me that I'm right. Quite naturally, we wanted to avoid pain and suffering. Anybody ever wake up in the morning and go, man, I can't wait to have some pain and suffering in my life? I don't care if it's physical, I don't care if it's mental, relational, I welcome it because I love it that way. Joking with you. Pain and suffering, and to feel more at peace. But a mind that is busy worrying cannot be that mind that is at peace. It's often been said that worrying is like trying to solve an algebra problem by chewing bubble gum. How many of us would go, wow, I'm worrying about this, let me have some gum, that'll solve it? Do we live in a world that is conducive to living in a peaceful state of mind? Something happened this last week, and if you don't play video games, you might not mean anything to you. But it speaks to where we're at as far as in this big awakening of humanity. For some of you may or may not be aware of is the Call of Duty, a video game entitled Modern Warfare, the third series in this three-part epic of these video games of death and destruction, was released, I think it was Thursday. And Modern Warfare 3 managed to sell, I want you to hear this, worldwide 9.3 million in the first day at a mere $60 a piece. Approximate. And the game is expected to sell 12 to 13.5 million copies in the first week alone. That would put the total Call of Duty, as I said, this is number 3, at over 100 million. So we know that many kids own all three. At an average price, as I said, of $60 per unit. As long as we have a consciousness and we have room in it as a society for such as this to have this still big of a place in our consciousness, it's hard for us to evolve when we have a huge part of our, especially our young people, gamers are average age 35 and under. Some diehards, 40-ish. When we still have this in our consciousness, it's hard to bring that forward because this game, I looked at many video examples to show you what it would look like. But it was too death and destructive to show you. It's too real. You can't hardly tell the difference between real and make-believe anymore in these video games. And do you want to know where video games came from, the history of? In World War II, the U.S. military wasn't happy with its shoot rate of its infantrymen. Shoot rate means how many actually fired their rifle in action. Do you know what the shoot rate was of American soldiers in World War II? According to the military itself, 25%. Only 1 out of every 4 men was able to hold their gun at another person and shoot it. So the military didn't like that. That's not very good. So you know what they started to develop so that they could change that? Full-size video games. So that their military men and women could begin learning to numb themselves to death and destruction. So that by the time we got to the Vietnam War, in the early 60s through the early 70s, guess what the shoot rate was of the infantrymen? 75%. 75%. This has been out there, this information I've been sharing for 20 years. It's not new. That's where video games first came from. Now we got our kids, 8, 9 years old, spending hours and hours in front of these death and destruction games. So here's where we put a stop to it. Parents, grandparents, do not buy those games for your kids. Buy the sports games, buy the fun games. I'm not saying don't play video games if your kids we won't ever have one in my house, so you know where I stand. We won't play those games. We can go outside and actually play tennis. We can go outside and run. Do not buy them, period. If your kids are under 18 and they're playing them, pull them from them. They are not good. If you do not believe me, sit in front of one of the games, sit with them for an hour and watch. Watch. So our world, our only habitat, is a biotic system. Under such stress, it threatens to fail in fundamental and irreversible ways. Major change is required to stabilize and restore its functional integrity. Examine any of the great environmental challenges that are facing us right now. Climate change, biodiversity loss, pollution, resource depletion, and a similar pattern emerges. A modest number of people know a great deal about these afflictions and unfolding tragedies, but their messages have difficulty overcoming public apathy, political denial, or entrenched opposition. Most of all, these messages rarely spur responsive public action or basic shifts in values and attitudes, or the behavioral change needed at the scale or within the time frame required. The result is what is commonly referred to as a failure of political will. But this phrase fails to capture the depth of the cultural void or social malfunction involved. At its deepest level, if we are to address the linked environmental, social, and even spiritual crisis, we must address the wellspring of human caring, motivation, and social identity. Many have concluded that what we need is a major shift in our core values and dominant culture. In effect, the evolution of a new consciousness. Aldo Leopold wrote to a friend back in 1944 that little could be done in conservation without creating a new kind of people. Peter Senge and his colleagues have similarly agreed, when all is said and done, the only change that will make a difference is the transformation of a human heart. So courage. Courage. Today we had many stand in front of us that were courageous, whether holding down the home front or serving in the military for 27 plus years. What does it take to put yourself in that space, that courage to serve one's country? What if you're a 19-year-old kid and you're critically wounded and dying in the jungle somewhere in the central highlands of Vietnam, and it's November 11th, 1967, and the LZ, or the landing zone, is hot. Your unit is outnumbered 8-1, and the enemy fire is so intense from 100 yards away that your CO, commanding officer, has ordered the medevac helicopters to stop coming in for you. You're lying there, listening to the enemy machine guns, and you know you're not getting out. Your family is halfway around the world, 12,000 miles away, and you'll never see them again. As the world starts to fade in and out, you know that this is your last day. Then, over the machine gun noise, you faintly hear the sound of a helicopter. You look up to see a Huey coming in. But it doesn't seem real because no medevac markings are on it. Captain Ed Freeman is coming for you. He's not medevac, so it's not his job. But he heard the radio call, and he decided he's flying his Huey down into the machine gun fire anyway. Even after the medevacs were ordered not to come, he's coming anyway. And he drops in and sits there in the machine gun fire as they load 3 of you at a time on board. Then he flies you up and out through the gunfire to the doctors and nurses and safety. And he keeps coming back 13 more times until all the wounded were out. No one knows until the mission was over that the captain had been hit 4 times in the leg and left arm. He took 29 of you and your buddies out that day. Some would not have made it without the captain and his Huey. Medal of Honor recipient Captain Ed Freeman, United States Air Force, died last Wednesday at the age of 80 in Boise, Idaho. May God bless and rest his soul. That's courage. Courage. So is it possible that in the midst of war, we really awakened? That we are really at a place of unbelievable courage, and where do we draw courage from? The divine connection to that thing that is the most important presence within all of us, whether you call it spirit or higher power or God. So you tell me whether we're asleep or whether we are awakened, even in the midst of war. We are being called upon to shift right now. We're being called upon to cause a shift in consciousness. And it has to come within each one of us. It has to come within each one of us making a commitment to understand that we are an expression of goodness, that we are an expression of kindness, that we are an expression of joy and happiness and peace. And as Gandhi has said and proclaimed for decades, that be the change that you want. Live the change that you want to see. The change has to come within us first. That when we find peace and harmony in our house, it's almost impossible to go out and not carry that peace and harmony with us, given the situation. It doesn't mean there's not times that we don't need to defend ourselves. Don't hear me wrong. When we grow up in a space of peace and love and happiness, when we come home, and that's where we find in our most important consciousness, our home environment, a place filled with love, a place filled with joy, a place where we know and affirm that we're wonderful, that we're beautiful, and that we're lovable. It's impossible not to go out and see that with each other. That's the shift. That's the shift that's coming. And it starts with each one of us. Every one of you, when you started on your spiritual path, is the day that the shift started within you. Some of you have been on it for 40 or more years. Some of you are new. Wherever you're at, the more of us that join in, the greater impact that we have on this thing called life, earth, and our home. May we make this a better place for not only those that are living, but for the generations that are yet to come. May we pray. Turning within to that place where we go to sense and feel, to connect with that thing that is greater than us. Knowing that that essence is moving through each one of us so divinely, so perfectly, that it does often create the illusion that we are separate from our higher power. There's never been a moment that we've lived outside of that power, of that presence. And we know and affirm that right now that presence is moving through each one of us as we right now hold our highest and best thoughts, words, feelings, and emotions for those that are serving their countries, from Canada to America and to all armed forces around the world. That they truly are serving with their highest and best intentions. Regardless of what the governments have decreed or declared, but that each young man and young woman that is serving their country, may they be filled with grace, may they be filled with the protection, may they be filled with peace. May their families have a strengthened understanding that they are there to hold a place of love for them when they return home. For all the families that have lost loved ones in service, may we affirm that their grief, their loss, is dissipating in a healthy, timely manner. But may we never forget those that have served our country on this weekend, lest we never forget those who have served so selflessly. For this and so much more, I am grateful to be a part of this community. I am grateful for the awakening, for the transformation that is taking place in each of us in our own perfect, unique way. For the love in this room, for the courage in this room, for the family members, the veterans served, and to the veterans themselves. May grace and God be with you on this day. And so it is. Amen.